Presentation is going to be on the motif of color in Annie Dillard's For the Time Being. Our thesis is that Dillard utilizes the motif of color to emphasize the underlying unity that humans have with each other and to the earth itself, despite the differences that may appear on the surface. So I'm going to talk about the motif of color and how it serves to create a correlation between humans and the earth. So the quote that I chose says, "The man of yellow earth's tear named him, for the lowest is a fine yellow dust." So the repetition of the word yellow in this particular sentence draws attention to what Dillard is describing, and in this case it's the lowest. By definition, this is a fine sediment that is formed by an accumulation of windblown dust, and this is significant to the book as a whole because it helps introduce the idea of accumulation, how things build up over time, like years in the human life. Since the dust is fine, it's fragile and can easily be stripped away. This resembles human life and how over our lifetimes we build up our legacies just for it all to be stripped away by the inevitable nature of death, much how like dust is stripped away by the wind in nature. However, this dust is easily replaceable as the wind will always continue to blow no matter what, just like how the generations of humans will replenish and always continue on. In regards to the context of the sentence, the archaeologists are digging up remains of centuries-old humans and see them as nothing more than just simply, quote, men of the yellow earths, end quote. Because of this idea that an individual literally belongs to nature and inevitably will be replaced, Dillard encourages her audience to make the most of their time here on Earth, and this plants a seed in their minds to consider if anything that they do really matters in the grand scheme of things. And much like a caution sign, the color yellow jumps out at the reader and essentially tells them to watch out and pay attention to this important idea that she will continue to develop throughout the rest of her novel. So next, I'm going to discuss the contrast between light and dark colors in nature. So the quote says, "If the rock is granite, as it is in the eastern United States, the sand is pale quartz and feldspar, granite's parts." So here, Dillard brings emphasis through this periodic sentence that the light-colored sand particles constitute granite's parts in order to create a metaphor that humans are tiny specks like sand that help construct the big, dark universe, which she represents as granite. Dillard's purpose in doing this is to convince her audience that they should not try to waste time finding answers and meaning to everything in the world, as she describes it impossible because of the darkness she attributes to the world. She instead encourages readers to find light and clarity in their own life like an individual grain of sand, and not to wastefully ponder the ambiguous, inconclusive depths of the world. Everyone's individual light is favorable on its own, but when everyone's different lives and opinions are added all together, it is impossible to try and find a universal purpose life that would apply and be accepted by every human. The light versus dark color contrast helps provide imagery for our individuality, literally succumbing to nature itself, just as the light quartz particles are seen as dark granite from far away. In other words, she is saying that you are small and indistinct in the big picture, so Dillard encourages her audience to develop their own lives and live in the moment instead of looking for the why in everything, because it just becomes a dark funnel with no transparency and no answers. The ideas introduced in this section are developed further in later chapters, such as Numbers, which proves that this is an important message Dillard is trying to convey throughout not only this section, but the novel as a whole.
Dillard's use of repetition, polysyndeton, and allusion help convey the message of how willing we are to help each other, even without being familiar with one another, as a means for humanity. The context of this quote, connecting it to humanity and the disappearance of a 16-year-old Hasid girl in the forest. Around 600 Hasid volunteers search for her, believing that if one life is saved, then it will be like saving the entire world, as quoted later in the text, with a detective later finding the girl and celebrating with a traditional Jewish dance. With Dillard repeating the color black, symbolizing dedication to both religion and the search, she shows how religion plays a key role for the search of the truth, such as searching for the missing girl, because of their willingness and dedication to pursue. Even with the Hasid volunteers not personally knowing, they still use their religion as a source to help and reach out to others, even though they are unfamiliar with them. Also, with polysyndeton repeating and being used in religious text, alludes to the men's appearance and religion, showing their dedication and devotion to their religion, also signifying their selflessness and emphasizing on what they are doing, as a contrasting color to identify their love and care even with being unfamiliar with each other. Showing this by searching for a girl whom they do not know. Now, with black normally being associated with evil and menace, it is shown as the opposite, as a sign of selflessness and righteousness. Another device that they use is imagery describing how the men look, with them having black hats, black beards, and black coats, using color and imagery to set a tone about these men Going back to the idea of how humanity is shown through colors.
Dillard uses colors to convey her message on what time really means to her. When she writes, I passed several monks, narrow man, fine and black, who wore tall black hats and long black robes, on page 78, she is conveying the purpose of passage of time by using repetition of the word black to not only show the colors of the monks' dresses, but also to attribute the color black to old age, which could mean that she's trying to convey the message that the older we get, the fewer the excitement for life we have, just like the monks. This all ties back to how Dillard uses colors to convey important messages. In this case, she explained a brief concept of what old life is like. Dillard also uses colors for the theme of life, more specifically, the themes of birth and death. When she writes one of the created accidents, such as blackness and whiteness, on page 140, Dillard uses juxtaposition by using the colors white and black, which respectively mean presence of all colors and absence of colors. Her purpose in this quote is to contrast birth and death with the use of the colors black and white, but also to compare them as one of the created accidents. With the contrast of black and white, or birth and death, Dillard basically depicts the two events, since birth is viewed as the first light seen by a baby, or white, while death is viewed as darkness, or black. By comparing the two as accidents, Dillard conveys the message that without human life, there would be less problems, since nature knows how to work when unbothered.
Starting off with the unity of one another and our connections with other beings, the motif of color is used to represent individuality. We see color relate to individuality, as Dillard states, there is no less holiness at this time as you are reading this than there was on the day that the Red Sea parted. The use of syntax by including of hyphens represents short syllables within the sentence. These short syllables are used in order to engage the reader and feel included, hence, as you are reading this. In a biblical sense, red symbolizes the color of the Holy Spirit. By including red, Dillard is able to connect the reader to the biblical reference holiness. Dillard is conveying how, though the world has immensely changed since the days Christ's human form walked the earth, and there is still enough holiness and virtue in the world today, which comes from the use of the color red in the quote. We may still accept Christ today as many did in the past. And going back to our purpose, Dillard is connecting people to the present, to the people in the past, without the mentioning of individuality in her statement. The underlying meaning by not including individuality is that people may or may not believe in this religious reference, which show individuality because this is generated by one's own thoughts, but in the end we are brought together by being able to relate to the people in the past. Moving on to the second quote. It laid yellow and gray less deposits hundreds of feet deep. Although the colors yellow and gray aren't necessarily opposites, the context of the colors show juxtaposition. The color yellow mostly represents freshness, happiness, and positivity, while the color gray represents dull, dirty, and dingy, with associations of depression as well. Dillard is connecting us as people to nature by including less. What Dillard is conveying is that people are either yellow or they are gray, which represents our individuality, but in the end, we all end up in the same place, burying ground that was once inhabited by people.